2 days before the general elections in Nicaragua, the distribution of electoral material is advancing. The Venezuelan parliament agreed to support the memorandum of understanding signed between the country and the International Criminal Court. Nigerian security forces rescued 6 people who had been seized at a university near the capital's international airport. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is from the south, I'm Katrina Goss. Three days before the Nicaraguan general elections, all the necessary materials for polling day are already in the process of being distributed throughout the national territory. According to the Vice President of the Supreme Electoral Council, polling stations will open on Sunday from 7 o'clock in the morning. After complying with the verification process by the representatives of all participating political parties, the electoral materials and voting devices were sent to the different departments of the country, and the first to receive them were those of the Caribbean region, which is the farthest from the capital. The government of Argentina announced that the anti-COVID-19 protocol for the legislative elections on November 14th will be different from that of the primary elections, since some measures will be more flexible due to the fall in the number of COVID infections in the country. The new measures were announced by presidential spokeswoman Gabriela Cerruti and later confirmed by the National Electoral Chamber. Cerruti informed that voters will have to wait in a single line at polling stations to make voting faster. In the primaries, voters first lined up outside the building and then at the door of the voting booth, a situation which caused long delays at several polling stations. In addition, transportation will be free for all forms of transport to facilitate voters' travel to polling sites. The aim of the measures is to ensure that the voting is quick and there are no unnecessary delays for citizens. Bolivia's prosecutor's office charged former de facto President Janine Áñez with 5 crimes on Thursday and requested 6 months more of a preventative detention. Áñez is accused of making illegal appointments, resolutions contrary to the Constitution and laws, breach of duties, anticipation or extension of functions and complicity. The court was asked to extend her detention at the Miraflores Detention Center in La Paz, where she's been held since her arrest, as the investigations into her crimes following the 2019 coup continue. The former de facto president is also being investigated for other offences against the Constitution and laws under her mandate, as well as failure to fulfil her duties. Her future will be decided in an upcoming hearing. On Thursday, the Venezuelan parliament approved an agreement to support the memorandum of understanding between the country and the International Criminal Court signed the day before by President Nicolas Maduro and Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan QC. In line with the agreement, Parliament ratified that the parties should make efforts to agree on mechanisms that will effectively contribute to Venezuela's resolution to conduct legal proceedings in accordance with Article 17 of the Rome Statute. During the session, the President of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, provided details on Khan's 3-day visit to the country and its outcomes. In an exclusive interview with teleSUR, Venezuelan Attorney General Tarek William Saab highlighted that despite the mainstream media's attacks on President Nicolas Maduro, justice is done in the country, something that commands respect from the International Criminal Court for the nation's institutions.
The truth is that we are experiencing a very intense work agenda, very straightforward yet cordial meetings, very transparent meetings, and on the basis of all these meetings we managed to reach an agreement. This memorandum of agreement. I would say one could even sum it up in the saying, he who owes nothing fears nothing. Venezuela, with its superior judicial bodies, with the public ministry and the ordinary courts, has delivered justice and has avoided impunity.
The Venezuelan Attorney General also stated that the authorities have issued 188 convictions over specific human rights violations committed in the country since 2017.
When the experts of the ICC jointly investigate with the Venezuelan criminal justice system, with the public ministry, with Venezuelan courts, they are going to be surprised with the long-standing work we've done in the development of technical expertise and forensic expertise. Just in terms of numbers of charges, of final judgments in cases of human rights violations, since 2017, we have seen 188 convictions.
The Attorney General also noted that over 40% of deaths during the attempts at destabilization by far-right opposition groups in 2017 were caused by armed protesters.
It was at the midst of public disturbances, very violent expressions. We have the numbers and we handed them over to the prosecutor Ken. Armed protesters were responsible for 40% of the fatal victims in the protests of June, July in the year 2017. Almost 15% were attributed to agents of the state. The rest were committed by civilians who even went as far as to put steel cables across public roads. They burned people alive. On that matter, we counted a total of 20 people who were burnt alive by unidentified civilians.
Venezuela is also in the midst of campaigning ahead of the November 21st regional elections. Speaking exclusively to teleSUR, the president of the National Electoral Council, Pedro Calzadilla, highlighted the importance of the negotiation process that has made possible the holding of the elections in November with the participation of all political forces.
This electoral branch is the result of extensive and intensive negotiations and agreements over several years, with ups and downs, with the difficulties that we are aware of, which in some cases have advanced, in others have not, but that in the year 2021 have provided enormous results, and one of the most important results, which has captured the attention of the entire national political spectrum and of international public opinion interest in Latin America and in Venezuela, which has captured the attention of the entire national political spectrum and of international public opinion interested in Latin America and in Venezuela, because a large part of the expectations for this dialogue to advance have been deposited in this National Electoral Council, appointed by the National Assembly as required by the Constitution.
And we'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Last week, the United States Justice Department dismissed 7 of the 8 charges brought against Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab due to the absence of evidence of alleged money laundering. In an exclusive interview, teleSUR English spoke to David Rivking, a partner at David Hostetler law firm and a member of Saab's legal team. He explained where the case now stands with just 1 count of conspiracy to launder money maintained.
That's a very good question. We are proceeding with an appeal in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals that presides over the district court in Florida and courts in several other states. We are championing Alex Saab's diplomatic immunity that arises from the fact that he was and still is a special envoy from Venezuela to Iran. The special envoy status gives him full diplomatic immunity. Therefore, no charges against him can be maintained. And we have every confidence based upon U.S. law and international law that we'll succeed in this endeavor.
The attorney also explained what could happen at the upcoming hearing on the case against Alex Saab, which was postponed to November 15th.
The November 15 hearing actually has nothing to do with his diplomatic immunity, which, as I mentioned, is being pursued in the 11th Circuit. The hearing really deals with important issues, but not the core issue of diplomatic immunity. It has to do with his opportunity to obtain bail and the condition, and related to that, conditions of his confinement. So it's an important hearing, but that is not the hearing that deals with the diplomatic immunity. Let me elaborate. So we've been in the 11th Circuit for a little while. We filed our opening brief some time ago. The government, which is to say DOJ, filed 2 requests for extensions. which tells you something as to how confident they are about their case. They finally filed a brief in opposition, arguing that diplomatic immunity should not be recognized for Alex. We just today, about half an hour ago, filed a reply, which is the last filing at this stage that we're going to do. The government may file additional motions, but we are looking forward to the oral argument that would be scheduled by the 11th Circuit. As I've already said, based upon historical practice, the U.S. case law, and international law, we have very strong confidence that our position would prevail and Alex would be released.
The US Justice Department has said it doesn't recognize Saab's diplomatic immunity as a special envoy. However, his defense team is insisting on this aspect. His attorney explained why.
Yes, the DOJ is completely wrong, and what they're arguing is inconsistent with U.S. case law. Let me walk through it carefully. United States has an absolute right to recognize or not recognize diplomatic status of somebody who is being sent to the United States, either as a special envoy or as a permanent diplomatic representative. The United States has no right to deny the recognition of diplomatic status in a situation where the sending country, which is Venezuela, and the receiving country, which is Iran, have agreed that Alex Saab is the special envoy. The United States is legally obliged, both as a matter of U.S. law and international law, to give full diplomatic inviolability to Mr. Saab. That is contained in the 1961 Vienna Convention, to which the United States is a party. There's also a statute called the Diplomatic Relations Act that goes to the same, creates the same obligation. Your viewers might ask themselves a simple question. Does the United States have any right to recognize or not recognize somebody who is being sent by France to Germany? Of course not. It would be absurd. And it's inconsistent with U.S. case law and historical practice. Let me tell you that the United States has always taken the broadest view of recognition of diplomatic immunity of third-party envoys, going back literally more than a century, and has always championed this view, not only with regard to the U.S. diplomats, but third-party diplomats. And we also now briefing describe the specific cases where this has arisen. So DOJ's position is fundamentally wrong, but this is how the legal process works in my country. You have two sides, us and DOJ, who are going to present our arguments. We've done it in writing. There will be an oral argument where we'll go before the judges. I will go on behalf of Alex. DOJ is going to have another lawyer. The judges will question us, and the judges would reach their decision. And as I said, we have courts that enjoy tremendous independence and would look at this case from a standpoint of a law and law alone. So I think we would do very well.
And attorney David Rifkin also explained the wider repercussions of the lawsuit against Alex Saab.
It's actually both. It's important to underscore that the diplomatic inviolability or diplomatic immunity, while Mr. Saab obviously benefits from it personally, it is ultimately an immunity that belongs to Venezuela as the sending state, and proceeding against him injures, of course, the sending state as well as the receiving state, which is Iran. It is an affront to the sovereign dignity of both countries. So it's one of those instances where the case implicates both Mr. Saab's personal situation as well as the broader context that I've described in my earlier answer.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Washington continues its interference in Cuba's internal affairs. On Thursday, the US Congress approved a new resolution supporting acts of destabilization in the Caribbean island, sponsored by Florida legislators hostile towards Cuba. 382 representatives spoke to defend the destabilization and violent acts that took place on July 11th in Cuba, when demonstrators, who were in many cases financed and encouraged from abroad through a media campaign and social networks, took to the streets and committed violent acts. 40 Democrats opposed the resolution, among them the representative of Massachusetts, Jim McGovern, for whom this provision does not recognize the contribution of the United States to the suffering of Cubans with the economic blockade imposed 6 decades ago. Thus continues the systematic attacks of the US government against the island, which is deploying soft coup strategies to overthrow the Cuban Revolution, regardless of the harm caused to the population, which has resisted imperialist attacks with dignity and for more than 60 years. Cuba's permanent representative to the United Nations Organization, Pedro Luis Pedroso, denounced on Thursday that the United States draws up unilateral lists and certifications hindering cooperation in the fight against terrorism across the planet. The ambassador pointed out at the special meeting of the Security Council's Counterterrorism Committee that Washington's creation of such politically motivated lists obstructs collaboration efforts and contravenes international law. The diplomat also underlined that the UN should pronounce itself against these types of designations, which only serve to stigmatize and exert pressure against countries that, in a sovereign manner, do not comply with the will of the United States. Pedroso stressed that the fight against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations requires a comprehensive approach backed by concrete actions. The diplomat reiterated Cuba's firm willingness to contribute to collective efforts to tackle international terrorism. Nigerian security forces Friday rescued 6 people who had been seized at a university near the capital's international airport. The victims were kidnapped Tuesday from the University of Abuja, raising fears regarding security around the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, some 20 kilometers away. The university announced on its Facebook page that those taken were 4 staff members and their children. Police said Friday that the hostages were rescued in a joint operation by security agencies. Nigeria is struggling with widespread criminality as bandits have increasingly targeted schools and universities in recent months. Gangs have kidnapped at least 950 students since December 2020. According to the UN, most of the victims are released after negotiations with the captors and often a payment of ransom. The United States is intensifying its anti-China narrative on several fronts. President Joe Biden raised the tone against Beijing in the framework of the COP26 negotiations, while NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg called to combat the supposed Chinese threat. The Chinese government announced that negotiations in the framework of the climate change conference were hampered after the United States delegation launched accusations against the country. The Chinese delegation to the event stressed that the maneuver undermined the prospects for cooperation and more positive developments in relations. At the same time, the NATO Secretary General again alluded to the alleged threat of China's development of its defense capabilities, despite the fact that the US and other powers continue acts of provocation and militarization in areas surrounding China. And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.